Welcome back to Political Capital, the intersection of money and politics. South African government is giving testimony at the State Capture Commission. Yesterday, we had Nhlanhla Nene take to the stand, tell us about the 4 times he's been invited to the Gupta household or had interaction with the Gupta family, and also told us about the relentless pressure from some of his fellow cabinet ministers and his boss at the time, President Jacob Zuma, to sign off on the precious trillion rand nuclear deal. So what are we to make of that testimony, and who does it really implicate? I spoke to Mfesane Ka-Siboto from the Johannesburg Legal Society. Let's begin by today's testimony. From what you've heard from Nhlanhla Nene, is there anything new per se that was not known already in the public domain?
Not entirely new. We've always known that the minister was doomed to be fired. Given his testimony, it's always been in the public domain. But what is interesting to note is the granular detail as to how that came about. Because now it comes to our attention that it's not just the president was involved in the state capture and in the firing of the minister. We hear of ANC meetings that were held wherein the dismissal of the finance minister Nhlanhla Nene and the deployment to the BRICS Bank was going to be implemented. So that granular detail is certainly new to the public.
A testimony like this is wide-ranging, and it may implicate a lot more people than we anticipate. For instance, Minister Nene today said that former Minister of State Security, Minister Mahlobo, and the former Minister of the Department of Energy were in support of the nuclear deal. Do those things warrant a cross-examination application?
Yes, I would imagine, because built into that is an implication that they flouted the state laws, as was put across in evidence by the minister Nhlanhla Nene. So absolutely, those 2 individuals, amongst many others I would suggest, are implicated, and in my mind they should be bringing an application to cross-examine and give their version of events.
The former president, Jacob Zuma, comes out of this as a man who was really intent on getting his nuclear deal, regardless of the law, regardless of procedure or due process. When you hear testimony of Minister Nhlanhla Nene saying that even the Russian president, well, it seemed had not informed the Russian finance minister, do you worry about the kinds of deals that could have happened without the checks and balances? And do we owe everything that we now still have to the refusal of Nhlanhla Nene and Pravin Gordhan and such and such?
Any person of sound mind would be bothered by that. It's a big testimony, it's big evidence that has implication on a lot of things, particularly and most importantly the rule of law. As I was sitting listening to the testimony of the minister, I was, to a degree, as a concerned citizen myself, outside of me being a legal practitioner, felt a sense of gratitude for the steadfastness of the minister. We do not know, I mean, of course, the credibility of the evidence is given, but at the face value of it, a lot is owed to him and the persons within the treasury and people that opposed what you are suggesting correctly to have been a decision that the president, the former president, was intent on pushing, flouting all sorts of laws with economic implications that are far-reaching.
Now we are here, we know that the former president's son is due to take his stand and cross-examine CNBC Jonas as well as Fakey Mentor. My question, does his father have reason to put his version of events across to this court?
Absolutely. He is at the core of all the allegations that we've heard. We've heard 4 or 5 witnesses that directly implicate the former president. He is the pivot of state capture. It would be, in my mind, unreasonable. It would certainly be inexplicable that we do not hear testimony from the former president. Certainly when it comes to cross-examining the witnesses, because incriminating evidence has been put forward by literally each and every one of them. It would be unthinkable that the president would not want to cross-examine it, particularly after the version and the witness, or rather the testimony that we've heard from the former, or rather the current minister.
Something that I think is unfathomable is how the ruling party, the African National Congress, has almost kind of tried to distance itself from the procedures that are happening here. Yet more and more we hear the name of the party coming into the crux of things. according to Minister Nene, it was post a top 6 meeting of the ANC that a decision was taken that he must be removed from then position of finance minister. Do you think the ANC must just swallow the pill? They need to send somebody, perhaps somebody like Gwede Mantashe, for instance, who was the Secretary General then when these things were said to be happening? Do you think they should be coming here with their version of events?
Absolutely. More so because that testimony has, in a way, implicated the ANC itself. And more importantly, because in my mind, there's certainly knowledge, certainly by Gwede Mantashe, who was then the Secretary General, of what was happening. Because it is from him that we know that the cabinet reshuffle decision was taken elsewhere. One would be interested to know what he meant by that. There's a lot of innuendo. It's a loaded statement. And I feel it is just the surface of the bigger issues and what the ANC knew about state capture, the complicity, potential complicity in the matter. So in trying to get to the crux and unraveling of the entire state capture, that cannot be done without the version from the ANC and its role in the state capture.
Julius Malema made threats and his economic freedom fighters prior to this testimony that if if Minister Nene does not come out with all the interactions and meetings that he's had with the Guptas and how far he's helped them in business or otherwise, that they will be pressing perjury charges. Should Julius Malema not be coming to this commission and offering the testimony of what he knows?
In my mind, literally every politician in the country seems to have knowledge in one form or the other of what happened in state capture, which would obviously be ridiculous, or rather ludicrous, to suggest that each and every politician should come to the forth. But I agree with you. Julius Malema has suggested that he's got knowledge of the minister's involvement in state capture. He should come and testify what that knowledge is. He should bring it to the attention of the commission, because if the commission is going to get to the root of state capture with full understanding of what happened, remember the commission investigates. So if they're going to investigate to its fullness, the state capture to its fullness, every person with critical information such as, well, as we now know Julius has or purports to have, that is certainly information and evidence that must be brought before the commission.
In the upper echelons of government sit some of the most senior people inside South Africa's ruling party. So, is the African National Congress encouraging and wooing its members to give representations at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture? And should they, especially on the back of what we've heard from the banks that were really being put under pressure to do business with the Guptas? Is the ANC on trial at state capture? I spoke to Zizi Kodwa. You still portray a level of interest with regards to these hearings. And you seem to be one of a few hierarchy members of the African National Congress who come here. So again, I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked you before. What's your interest and when are your comrades following suit?
I did not come here to appear or to present any evidence, except that you are following these proceedings with keen interest. These allegations, when they first surfaced, we took them serious. That's why as the ANC, difficult as it may be to the ANC in the organization, we said we called for the establishment of this commission, knowing very well that the name of the African National Congress will run through in all the testimony, and we have seen so far. Because we wanted to do 3 things: to restore public confidence in public institutions, to restore rule of law, to restore ethical leadership. And those issues are very important to us, because if the allegations that the state in which our people have entrusted the African National Congress is now being run by people outside of the elected leadership, we've got to be concerned about that. Because an ANC that does not acknowledge its own weaknesses is the arrogant ANC and the stubborn ANC. That's why when we hear, we say, for an example, we come from a difficult past. The fact that there will be names of the ANC, there will be bombshells upon certain leaders of the ANC, does not mean the ANC is on trial. Simple means that we've got courageous ministers, bold like Nene, that who must come here. His colleagues too must come here to account for their own action on their own behalf, not on behalf of the ANC.
But I'm going to ask you about the leaderships within, the leaders within the ANC and those people whose names have come up here. Namely, I mean, the issue of the now SG of the African National Congress and his premiership office spend with regards to the Guptas. You've heard the name of the now national chairperson of the African National Congress, Mr. Mantashe, here being mentioned, along with Mr. Godongwane and Mrs. Jessie Duarte. When are those people coming forth? I think that's what the public wants to know.
I will not speak on behalf of the serving Secretary General because the issues that are raised about him, they do not emanate when he was a Secretary General. They emanate when he was somewhere. So there are two different things. That is called a running commentary. When we talk about Gwede Mantashe, the meetings he held as a Secretary General, we are talking about an office. And Jessie Duarte and Enoch Godongwane, we are talking about an office. As a consequence of that, we have decided over the past weekend, the ANC will voluntarily come and make a submission and present its own version of the meetings with the banks to this commission. We have taken that decision. We are appearing before this commission. We are working on logistics with the commission as and when the time and so on. We may later, on the basis of testimony, decide to come back again to make a second bite as the African National Congress, as a governing party. We did the same with the TRC. We voluntarily appeared before the TRC because we had to explain our role in the liberation struggle. Now we may have to come and appear here to explain our role as a governing party. But that is a later stage. But as of now, we are working on our submission to explain our version in relation to the meeting with the banks.
I'm guessing something else came up with regards to this hearing here today that was not part of the NEC meeting that made that decision. Part of these submissions have led Judge Zondo to ask the question if the ANC top six keeps minutes in order to verify some of the information that he heard from Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene with regards to his dismissal in December 2015. Does the ANC top six keep minutes, and will it be submitting?
No, you can't just submit unless there's a purpose. You can't just voluntarily say, yes, we can submit. If submitting of evidence will validate the submission of the African National Congress, we will do so. That's why all meetings of the African National Congress minutes are taken.
So can we expect leaders of the ANC? I know you can't speak for them and you encourage them, but as the leader of society, as you call yourself, surely leadership is demonstrable, should be demonstratable rather than just speaking about it. So will we see some of the people that have been implicated as a result of these testimonies being urged to come forward?
It's not for the ANC. We can only make a call to them.
The true test of this job summit will be the ability to be frank, brutal and honest about the challenges facing South Africa's labour market and how we can change it to be globally competitive. I am Karabo Letlhatlha and this was Political Capital. We'll catch you again on Tuesday. Till then, keep it locked.